Okay, well, so good afternoon to everyone who's joining in person and virtually. This is our regular bi-weekly, mostly bi-weekly Germinator meeting. And so I'm happy to have DeAndre join us today from all the way from a different time zone, but not that far away. You're based in Calgary, I believe, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm in Calgary.
So just on the other side of the Rocky Mountains, so practically neighbors. So just to give you a bit of context, we communicated on LinkedIn before, but I think it'll be helpful for anybody who's hasn't attended a Germinator meeting before, and if anybody's watching the recording, to just a bit of contextualize what we're going to do today. So this is a bi-weekly meeting. The topic is very loosely defined as anything to do with innovation, commercialization, entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, and I'm kind of thinking in a very large spectrum of how does one go from doing the hard science of engineering. My background is in chemistry, biology, going from the benchtop out to the world and getting what it is that they have, whether it's physical objects or processes or technologies or even just knowledge, and how do you get that into society? The people, who wake up in the morning and they're not doing that type of work, but you still want to benefit their lives and make their lives easier, happier, more convenient, or just better quality in any dimension of quality you choose. So with that, why don't I turn it to you and let you just introduce yourself and a bit about your story, and we'll take it from there and see what questions people may have based on your story.
Sounds great. So hello, everyone. My name is DeAndre Wilson-Ihejirika. I'm a professional chemical engineer by, I guess, my educational background. I'm also a project management professional. I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, since I'm listing off all my qualifications. And I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto. So if you read my bio, I was born and raised in the Bahamas. So I spent most of my life there. I did all of my elementary and high school learning back home in the Bahamas. And then I moved to Canada to study chemical engineering at McGill University. And so from there, after I completed my degree at McGill, I went to do my master's degree at the University of Toronto in their Center for Management of Technology and Entrepreneurship. And actually, that was my first sort of experience, kind of to your point, Alon, of, how can we take maybe some of the things that we've learned in the classroom and apply them to a slightly different area. The Center for Management of Technology and Entrepreneurship kind of stood out to me because they were targeting chemical engineering students to come and join their research group, but it was very much a finance and financial engineering focus. And so they were leveraging some of the skills that you learn as a chemical engineer, like process mapping and mathematical modeling and analysis, but applying it to the finance industry, which I thought was a little bit interesting and unique. And then during that time, I also, focused a lot on entrepreneurship. My research was actually looking at trying to predict bankruptcy of small business using mathematical modeling. And a part of that too, I was the teaching assistant for the engineering entrepreneurship course at that time. So got me very interested in this idea of entrepreneurship and some of the different aspects of what it means to be an entrepreneur and how we develop skills as an entrepreneur. So that's kind of where this, I guess, entrepreneurial bend sort of started for me. And so that was fun and interesting. During that time, I also volunteered with the engineering outreach program at University of Toronto. In my undergrad, I was very involved with an organization called the National Society of Black Engineers. And so I did outreach with Black youth. And so when I went to do my master's, I also wanted to continue doing outreach. And so I ended up taking a role with the engineering outreach and specifically built out an engineering entrepreneurship course for high school students, which I thought was very fun and interesting as well. So when I completed my master's program, and anyone can feel free to stop me if they have any comments or questions, by the way, but I'll continue my story. When I finished my master's program, I then took a job in the oil and gas industry. And so I took a job in project portfolio management. So it was combining some of what I'd learned in my master's around, financial modeling and looking at a little bit of the economic side of things with my background in chemical engineering, because a lot of it had to do with trying to identify different projects that we wanted to invest in the oil and gas industry, and trying to determine, which ones would give us the best sort of return on investment while also mitigating risk. So that was some of the work that I did when I first joined the oil and gas industry. And then from there, I kind of pivoted in a few different roles. I ended up doing more project management type of work as well, which led to me getting my PMP. And then I also ended up doing a lot of process improvement work. So I did a lot of work on like chemical processes and process safety, but also ended up pivoting into doing a lot of business process review and business process improvement internally within the company as well. So you mentioned this idea of sort of entrepreneurship. I ended up doing some work along those lines to build out new types of processes and programs that we could do to improve how we measure process safety and how we implement process safety improvements across the company. So that was, again, a lot of fun. And so during that time, as I mentioned, I, was very involved with outreach and, had a very much a passion for giving back, especially for, Black identifying folks like myself, as well as for girls and women. And so it was when I moved to Northern Alberta that I guess first started my first business. So my first business was a handbag business. So shortly after I moved to Northern Alberta, I married a Nigerian. And I had a lot of friends who were from West Africa and fell in love with the different sort of Ankara and West African prints and wanted to bring that into some of the fashion, that I wore and that people wore. So I built a handbag company, which was called My Ziri Bag, which was building and creating handbags made from Ankara prints. And so I did that for a little while. And so
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you short, but part of the things that makes stories like this easy to digest is if we can follow the timeline. Mm-hmm. So if you can add that in to be easier for me to imagine, like say I worked at the oil and gas for 10 years or 5 years, and it's easier for me to follow the story.
So just because we're such a small group, do you want to quickly just introduce yourself as well?
Okay, yes. So my name is Ikenna Odikamnora. I'm from Nigeria. I recognize your surname very well. I was actually talking to my classmates yesterday. I'm like, because I have a classmate and his surname is Ihejirika. So I'm like, hey, Ihejirika.
Oh my goodness.
Here's your surname. I'm going to attend a conference from your cousin tomorrow. So I'm sure to say hi. So that I recognize the surname when I saw it. I'm doing my master's here in civil engineering. Uh-huh. And that's it. Thank you.
That's amazing. Yeah, I don't meet too many people with the Ihejirika surname, so you'll have to tell your colleague to reach out to me. My husband, as I mentioned, is Nigerian. He's Igbo, like yourself. And so, that's where I got the last name Ihejirika. Yeah. So cool. So, to your comment, in terms of timeline, so I completed my master's degree in 2012. And moved to Fort McMurray, Alberta, in Northern Alberta at that same time. Actually, slightly before, because I started with an internship with the company while I was finishing my master's, and then transitioned into a full-time role with the company while I was still there. And so I stayed and worked with Suncor for 8 years. I worked in oil and gas. But alongside the work that I was doing there, I started some of my social entrepreneurship. So I actually started the handbag business also in 2012. And so I started that at that time. And as I mentioned, I sold some of my handbags in Canada as well as back home in the Bahamas for a few years. And so did a few iterations of that. And part of it too was that I wanted it to be, again, have a social aspect to empower women in particular. So, I would get local women just to be the models for the bags and like take pictures. And then I also had a component where I gave back some of the proceeds to a small grant for young women who were looking to pursue their post-secondary degrees. So I did that for a few years until the 2016 Fort McMurray fire. And so at that time, I lost my home. My husband and I, we lost our home in the fire. And as a small business, all of my inventory was in my basement. And so lost all of the remainder of my handbags. But I kind of took that as a sign that maybe, it was time to take a pause on that business. I had also just recently had my second son. So I have two sons. One was born in 2013 and one was born in 2015. So my second son was just almost a year old when the Fort McMurray fire happened. And so I was getting a little bit more busy with motherhood. So I thought it was an okay time to take a step back from that business anyway. But it was definitely a fun endeavor. I learned a lot about supply chain because I was getting the fabrics from Nigeria, but I was actually getting the handbags made in China and then had to have them shipped to Canada. And so there was a lot of learning that took place there around, communications with different folks internationally, trying to find manufacturers for the handbags, the process of importing them into Canada. The first time I imported the bags, they actually held them at the border and they're like, oh, you didn't put made in China on the bags and you need to make sure that you have that on the bags or we can't allow them in. So I actually had to go to where they were holding the bags and label them with made in China before they could let me take them. So it was an interesting learning opportunity there as I went through that process with that first company. And so I really appreciated that time that I got to spend building that business and, learning a lot about different aspects of running a business as well as the social side of it. The second enterprise that I started that I'm still running to this day is BrainSTEM Alliance. And so BrainSTEM Alliance is a nonprofit organization and it's primarily volunteer run. And so I started that also when I was in Fort McMurray. As I mentioned, I'm very passionate about outreach. And so when I moved to Fort McMurray, after doing, the work that I had done in my undergrad, as well as in my master's, I wanted to continue doing outreach work while I was in Northern Alberta. And so when I got there, I was trying to find an opportunity to volunteer. And I approached a local girls organization called Girls Inc. of Northern Alberta. And I said, I'd love to volunteer with like a girls outreach program to encourage girls in STEM. And they said, we don't actually have any sort of program like that. Actually, we would love to do something, but we just don't have the expertise internally. We don't know anything about STEM. And I was like, okay, well, I know a lot about STEM and engineers. So, we can make this happen. And like I said, I was working in oil and gas. So I knew a few other women engineers that also really wanted to give back to the community. And so I brought them on board as volunteers. And so we started this program in collaboration with Girls Inc. And that program is still running today, which I'm very proud to say. But that was the inception of BrainSTEM Alliance because it made me realize that there were a couple of needs there. There were community organizations that might want to implement STEM programming that don't have the internal capacity. And there were also these STEM professionals that might want to give back to the community and might not have an avenue to do that. And so that's what BrainSTEM Alliance kind of the inception of it. And so really, again, when I kind of tie it back to some of the things that I learned as an engineer, solving problems and identifying those gaps was really, a big part of what led to the starting of BrainSTEM Alliance. I kind of saw a problem and how I could find a solution for it. And so I built something that could kind of meet the needs, these two different needs of the community, helping nonprofits that want to implement STEM programming while also allowing different STEM professionals that are working in industry to give back to their communities. So that organization is, still going strong. I still sit as the president of the board. And so now we have a network of what we call ambassadors across Canada. And so the ambassadors are these STEM professionals who volunteer with the organization and work very closely with different nonprofits in their communities to design and deliver STEM programs and workshops. And so, we do have a small team at BrainSTEM Alliance of part-time staff that handle a lot of the administrative aspects of running the organization, but it's still primarily run by our volunteers. And we've been able to sustain in a number of ways. We run on grant funding, so we apply to different grants, but we also leverage a platform called Benevity, which is a social giving platform that allows companies with, certain corporate social responsibility goals to give back to their community through their employee volunteering. So any of our ambassadors that work for companies that leverage this tool, any hour that they volunteer with BrainSTEM Alliance, their company gives funding back to our organization through their volunteering. So that's another way that we sustain our organization and get funding for the work that we do. So that's sort of the second sort of social entrepreneurship endeavor that I started. And again, that kind of happened while I was in Fort McMurray. I left the oil and gas industry because I wanted to try something else. I really enjoyed my time working in oil and gas. I learned a lot there, but I guess I never really had a super huge passion for the oil and energy space. My husband still works in oil and gas. He has a very much passion for it, but it's just not my personal passion. And so, we left Fort McMurray, we moved to the GTA. And then that's when I pivoted to work in the academic space. And so I took a role with York University. Again, kind of a little bit of this sort of entrepreneurship, process improvement work that I did when I was working with them. So a big part of my role there was around digital transformation of processes and trying to streamline and improve services across the institution. So I led that work for a while. So, trying to, again, leverage different technologies. There was a lot of IT project management that I did as a part of that role. And also, a lot of working with different stakeholders across the institution to understand all of the different processes there. After my work with York University, I actually took a role with a nonprofit called Elevate. And actually, a lot of the learning that I had in building out BrainSTEM Alliance really helped with supporting me pivoting into that role. So I took a role as the director of programming and employment partnerships. And so, a lot of the leadership development that I had, managing the different stakeholders in BrainSTEM Alliance, managing some of the staff that I had brought on through BrainSTEM Alliance, managing all the different volunteers for BrainSTEM Alliance, was able to translate into the leadership skills that I had for that role. And also ultimately into the role that I have now with the Calgary Economic Development. And so, now I'm working with the Calgary Economic Development as the executive director of work integrated learning. And so I've been in this role for about 2 months now, since me and my family moved from the GTA back here to Alberta and to Calgary at the end of the summer. So we just moved at the end of August. And so took this role here, working to, again, streamline processes. So again, that process engineering brain is still going strong, but streamlining processes across all 7 post-secondary institutions in the city to try and see how we can bring together the work integrated learning strategy across the city and better engage and support employers within the Calgary ecosystem so that they can hire, mentor, and support students as they develop in their post-secondary degrees. So that's my current role. I still, like I said, consider myself to be a serial social entrepreneur. I do different sort of projects every now and then. I mentioned that I have 2 sons. I also have a daughter. She was born in 2018. And so I took a longer maternity leave with her. I wouldn't say I'm a workaholic, but I do enjoy staying productive. So with both of my sons, I took shorter maternity leaves at around 6 months or so. But with her, I took a slightly longer one and went back home to the Bahamas. And in that time, started a business because that's just fun for me. So with my maternity leave for my daughter, I started this business called Hasties. Hasties is the maiden name for my paternal grandmother. And the business was a food products business. And so, I was working with local farmers in the Bahamas to collect fruits that may not have sold at the farmers market, that might be overripe, etc., and turning them into fruit syrups. So that was very fun. And it was something, again, using a little bit of my chemical engineering process brain. And I had always kind of wanted to try and do something in like food processing. That's probably what I would have done if I hadn't done like oil and gas stuff. So that was a really cool project, and I was able to get my syrups into a few different businesses locally in the Bahamas. Sold at I partnered with a tea company, and so we sold the syrups with the teas, and so kind of marketed it as something you can put in your beverages. I also partnered with a local coffee shop, and then also with a couple of small shops as well, to sell those syrups. So that was a lot of fun. Again, another business that I started, and felt that it was a good way to support local farmers as well. So again, that sort of social entrepreneurship angle of the things that I do. In addition to that, I also sit on the board for a nonprofit that I am the co-founder for back in the Bahamas. So again, another initiative that I started alongside my co-founder who lives in the US, and she's also Bahamian born. And I'm happy to say that that nonprofit is still going strong as well. That was founded back in 2014. And so it's somewhat similar to the work that I do with BrainSTEM Alliance. But again, it's focused on STEM outreach and supporting Bahamian youth back home in the Bahamas and encouraging them to consider STEM back home and, pursue post-secondary opportunities in STEM. So it's another initiative that I've started. So this is why I call myself a serial social entrepreneur, because I like starting these things and building them out. I have a few more ideas in my head, if I'm being really honest, and they're just like, okay, let's finish the PhD first, and then maybe I'll tackle some of those. But and so, yeah, I guess that's the one thing I haven't spoken about yet. So when I moved back to the GTA from Alberta, and during my time that I was working with York, I realized, I love academia. Let's go back to school. And so I'm doing my PhD part-time now, about 2 years in to the PhD. And my PhD is focused on engineering education. And so the focus of my work is trying to leverage and utilize data, big data, to better understand the undergraduate student experience and align it to career pathways. So a big part of that is trying to collect, so some of the work that I've started so far is collecting publicly available data from LinkedIn to try and map career pathways. And then the other aspect of that will be mining institutional data from post-secondary institutions. So right now I've already started mining some data from within the University of Toronto to understand, what were students doing, what were engineering graduates doing when they were still in school for their undergrad, what sort of courses were they taking, what co-curricular activities were they participating in, which co-ops or other work study programs were they involved in. And so trying to bring all of that data together and align it now to the LinkedIn data for after they graduated, and see where there are correlations or clusters or similarities or differences that will help us better understand which aspects of the undergraduate student experience are influencing the career pathways for engineering graduates. And a big part of that too, I think I mentioned already, I have a passion for supporting Black identifying folks and women identifying folks, but just in general have very much a passion for the EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion space. So a big part of my research as well is also going to be looking at, are there demographic differences when we explore the undergraduate student experience and career pathways? So for Black engineering graduates, are we seeing them going down different sort of career paths? And are there certain aspects of their undergraduate student experience that might have influenced them towards those different paths? So that's going to be a big part of my exploratory sort of data analysis that I'm doing for my PhD. And so that's also been really fun, and also aligning a bit with the work that I'm doing now in work integrated learning. So really continuing to learn and explore and develop programs and processes related to the intersection of learning and work. So yeah, that's the majority of my life story.
I really appreciate, the so much of experiences that followed. And when you tell it this way, it all feels like it was natural and just kind of flowing seamlessly. And I can only imagine if I were to, one day share what I've been doing for the last 20 years, it would probably feel similar when you tell it in this way, but you experience it, you realize that there are actually a lot of moments in times like, where am I going now? And having to make decisions. And I just want to, I have a lot of questions for you, but I want to give the students in person and virtually the place to ask questions. So I'll just ask one question as a leading question that I hope would benefit some of the discussions. You mentioned the term social entrepreneurship many times over in all your experiences, and I think for some people the term doesn't always make sense. Like, you don't know exactly what it is you mean. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you can clarify, what do you mean when you say social entrepreneurship? Mm-hmm. and whether that means different things at different times from your own experience, because you mentioned it in several times over, and there were different companies doing different things at different stages. So if you can kind of comment on what does it mean to you, and how did that meaning change or not over the experiences you had?
Yeah, I think just at the broadest level, and to your point, different people might have different sort of interpretations or definitions of what social entrepreneurship is. But from my perspective, at the broadest level, I would say social entrepreneurship is creating some sort of enterprise that has some sort of positive social impact. That's really a big part and focus of the enterprise, and it's not necessarily as focused on the revenue generation, or it's equally as important, at the very least, focused on the positive social impact versus the revenue generation. So that's my sort of definition of it. And again, there's a spectrum there. To your points, like, I talked about a couple of the nonprofits that I founded. So I would still consider those to be social enterprises. And they're very much more so focused, obviously, on that social impact side, and not at all focused on the revenue generating side, since they're nonprofits. But they still have a revenue or an income generation stream to them to continue operations. Whereas, you can look almost at the completely opposite spectrum. And it's funny, I've done some presentations. Maybe I should have brought some slides. I've done some presentations before on social entrepreneurship, but and I have one that I co-presented with someone that actually shows a bit of the spectrum. But on the other side, you might have, again, I mentioned some of the companies that we partner with that have sort of corporate social responsibility goals. And even though their primary focus is on this revenue generation, they still have this social impact side where they're giving back to the community for their corporate social responsibility. And then there's some that are, maybe a little bit more in the middle, where they definitely are for profit, but a core part of the way the businesses run is around making sure that there's positive social impact. So I mentioned, for example, the company that I started during my third mat leave with my daughter. And so, it was a for-profit, making money selling these syrups, but that social side is really supporting the local farmers and helping them to sell fruits that maybe they might not have been able to sell because they're, you know, like I said, overripe, etc. So there's still a core part of the way the business is being operated and run that relies on this social impact side of things. Similarly, you know, the handbag business that I mentioned before, again, that was a for-profit business. But, you know, I think it would be maybe a little bit more on that side of the spectrum, where we're just giving some of our profits back to support women with small grants. So again, a little bit more of that sort of corporate social responsibility side, but there's still an aspect of the work that's focused on giving back to society. So yeah, I hope that answers the question, but happy to take any other questions that, or answer any other clarifying questions along those lines.
Yeah, thank you. And anybody in the room or in the virtual room would like to ask a question or share an observation?
So if I got your story correctly, it was that you were running your non-profits, the same, like it was part-time essentially. You were working in oil and gas, then you were teaching at York University, and then you started your PhD part-time, and all this while you were carrying your non-profit along.
Correct.
I just wanted that clarification.
Yeah.
In order to be an entrepreneur, you have to have like massive connections, right? So how did you have, you know, connections? Any tips on that? Connections with the people. So any tips on that?
I wouldn't say that you need to have massive connections to be an entrepreneur. I think a part of building a business is you make those connections along the way. Definitely it's helpful if you have connections already. But you don't have, if that's your barrier for starting, I would say that you shouldn't see that as your barrier to starting something. You will, you know, build those connections along the way, and you make strategic connections. You're not just going to make connections just with anyone. You know, I mean, there's always value in learning from different people and understanding what other people's journeys have been. But you want to just understand, like, what are some of the connections that will actually help me as in my personal growth and in the growth of my business. So, you know, from that perspective, I guess I'll use the example of Ziri Bag. Like, I honestly didn't know anything about handbags when I started that business, and I didn't have any connections focused in, you know, handbag business. And so, you know, it was a lot of just searching it up online. You know, where can I find different manufacturers of these types of fabrics? Where can I find manufacturers of these types of handbags? And then starting to reach out to people to now ask questions about it or get advice, or reaching out directly to manufacturers. And so I slowly built those connections as I was building out my business. If I take the example of BrainSTEM Alliance, you know, similarly, I didn't start with a lot of connections. I had experience before in building out programs. And so I leveraged that experience and, you know, had conversation with some of the folks that I had worked with in the past, you know, at University of Toronto, et cetera. And so, you know, those connections that maybe I had through my post-secondary, I leveraged. But then I built those connections that I had, you know, with colleagues at Suncor. As I mentioned, you know, the first volunteers were just my colleagues at Suncor. So, you know, just reaching out to other women who were working at the company with me and saying, would you be interested to volunteer with this? And so I made some connections there. And some of them might put me in contact with other folks. And similarly, you know, working with Girls Inc., I honestly it was a cold email to them, like cold outreach, like, I want to volunteer. And so, you know, that kind of started that initial connection. And as I got more involved in the community, I was able to meet with other folks at different community organizations. And that's how we sort of got more partners for BrainSTEM Alliance. So when they heard about what we were doing with Girls Inc., they're like, oh, we'd love to have you come and do a STEM workshop with us. And so, you know, that kind of word of mouth spread. And so, you know, from that perspective, I would say, yeah, think about what you're interested in or what type of business you want to start. And just, you know, if you do already have like colleagues, classmates that are in that space, you can have conversations with them. And then you can actually start joining, maybe there are meetup groups or associations or societies that are focused in those areas as well, that you can be a part of and start building some connections there. But also just, searching online to see, if there are any forums or specific people that would be of interest to have a conversation with. So yeah, there's a few different ways that you can go about it, but I think usually the best relationship you have are the ones that you build somewhat organically through, just the type of work that you're doing. So, as a student, your best bet right now are your classmates and other clubs and things that you have going on. As I mentioned, I was very involved in the National Society of Black Engineers when I was in my undergraduate degree. And actually, the first board member that I brought on for BrainSTEM Alliance was one of my really good friends from National Society of Black Engineers. And, I actually got a few more of my ambassadors to join who were also, I was involved with the National Society of Black Engineers with, for example. So, there are a few different ways that you can make connections, but think about where your interests are, because that also, when you reach out to those folks and have conversations with them, if you're genuinely interested in it, I think the conversation flows a lot better and that connection is formed a little bit more organically.
And I just want to kind of tie this in, because we had a similar discussion a couple of weeks back when we talked about where do ideas come from. And one of the questions that came from that discussion was, well, once you have an idea, what do you do with it? And it basically what you just said, which is you have to reach out to people, whether people you know or people you don't know, but the emphasis is on conversations. And generally speaking, people like to be helpful. If you reach out to somebody and said, I have this idea, I would like to get your help in getting some understanding about this. You're not asking for money, you're not trying to sell anything. You're really just wanting a conversation so they can help you better understand. People are genuinely happy to help and they feel good about helping others.
Yeah.
So not being shy and just reaching out is definitely something that we need to embrace. I'm mindful Vikas has his virtual hand for quite a while and you're not getting tired yet, so that's good.
I actually think our team, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, had their hand up first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was just wondering where you talked about reaching out to manufacturers. I was just wondering, like, how did you go about doing that? Did you just like search them up and just like find their email and email them, or like how did that happen?
Yeah, I actually literally just did that, if I'm being very honest. And oh my goodness, it's been a while now, but I actually used Alibaba as my sort of first go-to. So I searched on Alibaba and to see, who was on there manufacturing maybe similar kinds of handbags, and then just kind of, reached out to them directly and said, I see you're already manufacturing things similar to this. Would you be interested to have a conversation to see if it would be a good fit to manufacture the handbags that I'm thinking of? And so I reached out to a few different folks like that and got a few different samples, and then ultimately settled on one that I thought had the quality and style that I was looking for the handbags. There are other ways that you can do it.
I see.
But like I said.
And did you have like a design team for like designing the handbags, or did you is it possible to do it like individually? Was it?
So no, I didn't have a design team. That probably would have been the better way to go if I had wanted to scale my business much more. But it was definitely a small business. And so, I leveraged, different designs that I had seen and styles of handbags that I was interested in, and kind of did a little bit of mock-ups in my basement. And like I said, worked with the manufacturers to kind of get it to the style and quality that I was comfortable with. And then ultimately, once I only had 3 SKUs, and so once I had settled on sort of those 3 SKUs. It was pretty much just manufacturing them with different patterns of Ankara print.
I see, that makes sense. And how did you like finance the bags at the very beginning? Like at the very beginning where you're starting, you don't like, you have to start with something and you're not making any profits off of anything. So how did you start with like some kind of financing option?
Yeah, so for that business in particular, I did use my personal funds. Luckily I did have a decent salary working in oil and gas. So I had a little bit of savings set aside that I could use to start it. But I didn't start with too much, if I'm being honest. So I started with about $5,000 to get it up and running. And so I had that sort of set aside again from working in oil and gas. And so was able to use that to start with the first set of, like I said, prototypes and designs, and get the first sort of run going, and then use the profits to do a few other runs going forward from there. I also did enter a few like small business competitions and got a few small grants through that as well. Again, they were small, like $5,000 awards for these like pitch competitions and things like that, which also I was able to put back into the business to continue like funding additional runs.
I see, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and we actually had a session on financing, I think last year. We spent the whole session just talking about where does the money come from. So we can repeat that as needed, but yeah, that's an entire hour just talking about where does the money come from.
Definitely.
Yeah. Vikas, do you have your question?
Yeah, hi. I have a question. Yeah. First of all, thank you, DeAndre, for the wonderful introduction, and you had a very good journey. I'm really impressed with this. So I have a couple questions. I mean, like I'll start with one. I'll first introduce myself. My name is Vikas. I'm a PhD candidate here. I'm finishing my PhD soon, so working on my thesis at this point.
Yeah.
So I have so when it comes to entrepreneurship and making the idea work well. So the only thing that I really struggle at this point is because we being into technical side of it, we do not know business, and I've never been to any business. I don't have any business knowledge. So the question that comes in my mind is like the execution of idea. You have so many ideas all the time. You bring like wonderful ideas and you just wanted to execute it, and you know that idea has some potential and it can really change the world and do things, but at the same time you do not know how to really approach like make an idea. I know that this is beneficial, right? I'm working on anaerobic digestion. I'm working on converting waste to energy. I know it is something basically we all wanted to go for. Everyone is spending $1 trillion basically on carbon neutrality, and all those things are happening. I know this and that and everything. The question that comes in my mind is like, what are the documentation I have to really care about? The legal legal formalities, and who to approach first. I know I can just talk to you. I can just talk to anyone and share my idea, and I'm sure you guys will be very interested. What we are doing is basically are working with Metro Vancouver, and we are building very good technology with them. And I wanted to do some similar to that, and it has very huge potential. There is no question about it. So there is no technical loophole. And because it's an industrially applicable system. The only question that I always struggle, okay, forget about getting your money for, I do not know where to start, right? So I mean, it would be really nice if you just say, like, just see my idea as a new idea that comes to you. So what is the first thing you will do to really just execute it? So you do not want to convince anyone, you are already convinced and all those things. Yeah, we'll start with that. Thank you.
You've already convinced people.
I think if I just share this idea with anyone, I'm sure they will be convinced, because that's what basically world need. It's just waste, as we have so much waste all the time, and we are trying to convert that waste to energy. And even if you're not doing anything, if you're not even making money out of it, we are doing actually social entrepreneurship. I'll have another question of social entrepreneurship later, but let's start with this. I'm very excited. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that's something that you want to consider too. What kind of business do you want to start? Do you want it to be a for-profit or a not-for-profit? Because that sometimes can determine sort of the approach that you take next in your next steps. If you're assuming that you already have financing, then that's a really good like tick box. If you don't, again, that can also determine how you're going to get your financing. Are you going to try and, to your point, commercialize it? And so with that, if you feel as though you have a solid sort of proof of concept or prototype, the first thing that you would need to do, or I would suggest that you do, different people will have different advice, is to find your one first client. That's what I usually tell people is to start off with. Like, if you can find your one first client that's going to use your product or your service, we'll kind of almost partner with you at the start there to continue to improve on that service or product to get it to the point where you now can expand it to new clients. I would say that's usually the first step for most businesses at getting started out. You want to see if you can actually prove that it works out in the market. So for something like that, with what you're doing, I mean, I'm guessing since you're doing your PhD in that area, maybe through your PhD, you've already have a prototype or something that's working, maybe.
Yeah, basically, we are working on a patent technology, which brings a very good solution to the industry. And our idea is basically, like my idea basically is not to use the one that we have done, because when you work on this on something, you know the better version of it, right? Which you can try, the recommendation part of it. The recommendation part of it, I really wanted to explore, which is not basically a patented thing, so which I cannot use, it was always there in my mind since I was doing my master's. I'm basically a biochemical engineer, so I always have a product oriented mindset. I always had. So when you say the define the client, so do we need to first produce? I mean, like, I can just write in the email and say that I just want, like, it's $1 million funding. I just really cannot approach like that. So I should have some kind of a business model. So would you suggest like I should go for some companies who can develop a business model? Because I even do not know what business model means actually,
Okay. Yeah. So I guess that was the step back that I was saying. You want to decide if you did want to do like a nonprofit or a for-profit, and that will kind of help to determine the business model that you're wanting to do. So if you're not sure about that step, I would definitely say, I'm sure Alon would probably be able to give you lots of resources, but internally,
teaching a course, Coral
there you go. He's teaching a course on it. So I would say reach out to him. And I'm sure there are probably other resources within UBC, whether there's, workshops or maybe incubators or things like that for students that you can, go to and support. When I worked both at at York University, I worked specifically in the Vice President Research and Innovation Office, and typically the VPRI office will have like innovation specialists that are specifically there to help with commercialization of research. So if that's the route that you want to take, I would say reach out to those folks as well. You're like the VPRI office at UBC. And if you're a student, you might want to work with your supervisor, but I don't know. It depends. Like, do you want this to be with your supervisor, or do you want to do something on your own? You have to think about that as well. But those are different resources. So, as a student, there's lots of things that you can probably leverage within UBC.
I'll put a plug and say that on February 15, I think, the manager of innovation, Sandra Spencer, last name, I forgot. Anyway, but Sandra is going to be coming to the Germinator on February 15, and she's the manager of innovation from the VP Research and Innovation Office at UBC Okanagan campus. So that would be definitely a good person to meet, talk, and chat about all that. I also want to kind of contextualize Deandra's experiences in social entrepreneurship and even the handbag business. I think we need to be very careful with advice, and Deandra mentioned that you get different advice from different people, because if you're setting up a handbag manufacturing line that takes very little capital, the process you go through to set it off the ground is very different from a waste treatment facility that needs $500,000 or a few $1,000,000. So maybe theoretically it's the same idea because you're starting a business, but that's kind of where it ends. The practicality of it will take you a very different path. And I should also point out there's another kind of black box type of question, which is it a established technology off the shelf, or are you creating a new technology? Because that in itself will create another big question that will change your way of doing things. So I think the single best advice, and you're already doing it by being here, is listen to as many stories from different people with different experiences, because whatever your idea is right now will, I guarantee you, will change. As you talk to people, whether they're customers or entrepreneurs, your idea of what you want to do or what should be done and what people will pay for will evolve. Guaranteed, 100%. Not a single idea people had in their brain when it actually came out of their mouth did not change. I've never seen any idea that did not evolve as soon as you spoke it out loud to somebody and saw their facial expression, and got feedback. So talk to as many people like DeAndre, like other speakers that will be on this seminar series, and then it's up to you to make the decision on what matters more and less to you. Again, like in DeAndre, a lot of social entrepreneurship, a lot of nonprofits under her belt, but you don't have to go that route. But her story tells us a lot of good lessons that can take away, again, even if you are going in a for-profit route.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Alam. Thank you, Andre. Yeah, I just have like follow-up question in that, like very small question. Like when you say the social entrepreneurship, the same, we are just roaming around the social entrepreneurship. I think all the business can be seen as a social entrepreneurship business, because they create, employment, and somehow they help the society and do things. So I mean, I do not know which direction this idea will follow. Are we saving the environment, or are we making the profit? So I mean, it is basically we are saving the planet. That is my first goal. Like when I say it, but I'm definitely, it makes huge profit, like $1 million profit. Our industrial partners, they are making $1 million out of it, and then just they are building the same technology. Like basically they already started working on it. So I'm not using the same idea, but basically the same concept, same basic knowledge. So yeah, so maybe just give me a brief, where is the line where I can say it's a business, it's a social entrepreneurship, but it's a complete business. So yeah.
Yeah. So kind of what I was getting at before is it's a spectrum, right? There is no solid line in the sand that says it's a social entrepreneurship and it's not. Kind of what I was, and to your point, maybe some people might say all businesses are social entrepreneurship businesses. That's debatable, but kind of more so on the one side of the spectrum, I would say are usually like for-profit companies with like a CSR, corporate social responsibility mandate, right? So focuses on making money, but they give back to the community in some way, whatever their CSR goals are. For a business like what you're describing, I would say, it's probably a little bit more towards the middle, but it sounds like you'll still be focused primarily on the profits, but the product that you're making has an environmental impact. And so, and you really have to think about that as for yourself as an entrepreneur and any potential co-founders that you bring on board, what you want sort of the goals and sort of mission and vision of your organization or your company to be. There's nothing necessarily wrong with being completely focused on profits. There's lots of companies do that and, do a lot of good work, the Googles and the Apples and all the rest of the world. So you think about what you want your company to be focused on. And again, I would point back to Alon and a lot of the work that he's doing. I'm sure in the course that he's building out, when you're doing your business planning, you can have a part of that is in your business plan. What is the ultimate goal and mission of the company that I'm building?
Yeah, and I'm mindful of the time. It's 1:00, well, Pacific time anyway. So I don't want to tax your time beyond the hour that I asked you to join us. But let me just say that I'm super grateful you joined us today on behalf of students in the room and the one in virtual room. And I will share this on the Entrepreneurship Engineering website that I manage so other students can benefit from your story. I was just restraining so many questions I had in my head when you were sharing your story. And I hope I get to explore them with you in future events. And I'll also put a plug for myself shamelessly that I'm running an engineering education seminar series here at UBCO School of Engineering. And I would be very happy to invite you, maybe even in person, if the time works for you, to share more about your engineering education research, not the entrepreneurship side. Maybe down the line when you have more thoughts to share on your data and your methodology and the results potentially. So with that, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and yeah, until we meet again, hopefully this summer in June for the Engineering Education Conference or
Yes.
before.
I'm really hoping to be there. I'm pretty sure I'll be there. So I'll see you there or before. And yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me for this seminar. I'm more than happy to connect with any of the students that are here on the call or anyone who watched the recording afterwards. So feel free if you do have any other questions for me specifically. To Alon's point, there's going to be a lot of other entrepreneurs in this series that will have different advice, different stories. I think the main thing for me, I consider myself, as in addition to a social entrepreneur, a sort of lifelong learner. And so for me, being an entrepreneur is really about the learning experience and that I take from actually implementing and starting and managing and operating these businesses and enterprises. But different folks will have different reasons for why they've become entrepreneurs. And so I would encourage you to attend the other sessions as well to hear the other stories.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Stay
Thanks,
warm.
everyone.
Winter is coming. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.